My background and qualifications to introduce the next speaker are fairly minimal. The only ones I could come up with, to be honest, were that I had the privilege, and I didn't really understand it as a complete privilege at the time, to live for about 2 years on the Navajo Indian Reservation. And at the time, I was one of a couple white kids living in and amongst lots of Native Americans, going to school with them, learning from them, and generally being a minority. And so I think it gives me a very unique perspective to address folks who are here tonight and think about where those things come from, and not always are folks with fair skin going to be a majority in any group. But it's now my pleasure to introduce Cliff Trafsler, the Costa Chair of American Indian Affairs at the University of California at Riverside. And he's the Chair of Ethnic Studies and the Director of American Indian Studies at the Center of Native Nations. Boy, that's a long title. And also the Director of Graduate Studies in the Department of History. He's a Wyandot Indian and shares with me German descent on his other side, and he's also the former Chair of the American Indian Studies at San Diego State University. Without further ado, Cliff Trafsler.
Mouse was traveling through the forest one day, and as he went along, he saw wolf. And you know that the wolves will eat mice. So he went off and hid behind a tree. And he watched the wolf, and the wolf moved forward and then hit a tree and backed off and moved forward again and hit another tree, backed off again, hit another tree in another direction. And soon Mouse understood that Wolf was going blind. So he wasn't as afraid as he normally would be, and so he went out and he talked to Wolf and he said, "Brother, I see that you have a problem. You can no longer see." He says, "Yes, I'm going blind, which means that I'm going to die. I'm a hunter. I live by hunting. I can't hunt without my eyes." And so the mouse sat there for a moment, and then he reached up into his eyes, and he took his eyeballs out, and he gave them to Wolf. And now Wolf could see, and he was just overwhelmed with this gift, and said, "This is a tremendous gift, but what about you? Now I can see, but you can't." He said, "Well, you're a great animal. You need to see. I'm small and insignificant. There are many of us." And so Wolf returned the favor and reached down and grabbed the little mouse and put him up on his neck. He said, "We'll travel together as brothers, and I'll take care of you." And so they did for years and years, travel about. And they would eat together and hunt together. They would sweat together and pray and sing together. They became good friends. They became brothers in the truest sense. One day, as they were traveling along, Mouse felt a change occurring in his body. And all of a sudden, his hind legs started to reach out. And at the end of his little toes came talons. And where his forearms were, wings appeared. And his arms grew out like this, and wings now. And then his neck elongated up in the air and came around, and where his little nose was became a beak. Eyes reformed in his eyeballs there, in his sockets, and he took off from Wolf's back. He became eagle. The Creator had seen the goodness that he had given to Wolf, and he repaid them in this great transition. I see what we're doing here and what Mr. Martin is doing tonight as creating eyes for the wolf that cannot see. He is providing insight to us, as other California Indians do. This is the place of the Kuya people, the Serranos, the Gabrielenos, the Luceños, the Copeños not so far away, the Kumeyaay just south of us. There are so many Indian people who have lived with this land for years and years, thousands of years, since the beginning of time. We know about this through stories and through the songs, like the bird songs that were sung tonight. The bird songs tell us about a time when the people at the beginning of creation spread and scattered like birds and saw different environments. And they remember those and they sing about those, not just about birds, but about mountains and springs, water courses, mountains, all sorts of things. They knew these things. The California Indian people, the Southern California Indian people, live very close to the environment, and they took care of the environment. They didn't haphazardly move around from place to place, but rather they knew where to go to gather, to hunt, where to meet for ceremony. They knew their sacred places. They took care of the oak trees and they trimmed them up. They cleaned out from underneath them. They burned the grasses to encourage the grasses to grow, grasses and other plants that they would eat. They took care of their environment by sowing, and they would create oak groves. So many of the groves that we see here in different canyons were not just haphazardly put there. They were part of an agricultural system of California Indians. The people also knew a great deal about hunting and gathering. They knew a great deal of science. And there is still a great deal of this knowledge known by the elders today about the relationship of human beings to particular plants and animals, and which plants are to be eaten, which plants at certain times can be good medicine, and which plants to stay away from because they can be bad medicine. All these things are about medicine and about the relationship of human beings to the environment. And the California Indian people know this relationship well. And people like myself coming to their land, I listen to the elders, I learn from them, and it becomes part of my work as a writer, but also as a professor, to teach this knowledge in my classes.